Something had gone terribly wrong on landing, and investigators wanted to know why. They questioned the survivors of Flight 1420, who would provide an extremely important clue. The NTSB needed to find out why the plane slid uncontrolled off the runway. They set out to interview surviving passengers, many of whom were local to Little Rock. Their eyewitness testimony would point the inquiry towards the most important mechanical system used to slow a plane down after landing.
We were really interested in were those passengers that were sitting in a position right near the wings who could look out the windows and tell us whether they saw the ground spoilers deploy.
Spoilers are large flaps that flip up on landing, literally spoiling the airflow over the wings. This is necessary to allow braking to take effect. None of the passengers saw the spoilers deploy. The NTSB compared their testimony with data from the airplane's black boxes. The flight data recorder, which monitors the systems on board during flight, confirmed that the spoilers had indeed failed to deploy. The implications were catastrophic. Flight 1420 had no hope of stopping in time.
On the brakes! We're sliding! Oh
no! So was the failure of the spoilers to deploy a mechanical problem? Or in the confusion of final approach, was it pilot error? To find out, the NTSB would make clever use of the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR.
You want 40 flaps? Yeah, I thought I called it.
One of the key elements that the CVR team was listening for was the setting of the spoiler handle. We saw on the flight data recorder that the ground spoilers didn't deploy. We wanted to know if the handle had been actually armed or not, and we were looking for a specific click sound. We couldn't find that sound on the accident CVR, which led us to believe that the handle was never in the armed position at touchdown.
Intensely busy in the cockpit, the pilots simply forgot to arm the spoilers. Had they deployed, the MD-80 aircraft might have overshot the runway, but it would have stopped before hitting the catwalk. The pilots had made serious and ultimately fatal errors, but investigators wanted to know why. They suspected that pressures earlier in the flight led to these mistakes. They turned their attention to the weather.
It was clear to us that severe weather had been in the area around the time of the accident. How it played a part was one of the things we had to try to discover. And putting the radar images in, the observations, trying to put it all together would take weeks, of course, to get this information done.
The NTSB wanted to know what role the weather had played in the crash, and had the pilots been fully aware of the dangers.
See how we're going right in the middle of this crap?
One of the concerns that all pilots have when they're trying to land an aircraft is, of course, making sure that the crosswinds that they may experience don't exceed the capabilities of either themselves or the aircraft.
The wind's now 350 at 30, gusts 45.
Can we land?
This particular flight crew had a limitation, not imposed by themselves, but imposed by the company, and that was that they were not allowed to exceed a 10-knot crosswind on a wet runway.
Crosswind limits are clearly stated in the operating manual. The crew of 1420 were flying beyond regulation limits.
This is a can of worms. There's a runway off to your right. You got it? No.
This NTSB animation clearly shows the effect of the winds, causing the captain to make desperate last maneuvers.
Winds definitely impacted the flight. If you look at the animation, you'll see them fighting the winds. Definitely not good.
We're down! On the brakes! Other one!
But when you start talking about a wet runway, thunderstorms, not a good scenario.
But were the pilots of 1420 aware of the hazards posed by the severe weather? For the NTSB, the dangers of thunderstorms were all too clear. In 1994, a U.S. Air DC-9 fell victim to wind shear in North Carolina. The plane stalled at 250 feet and fell from the sky. A Delta TriStar crashed after flying into the most severe kind of wind shear that created an intense downdraft of air. So should the crew of 1420 have aborted the approach?
There's the runway. There's two runways.
Yeah, I know. See, we're losing it. I don't see how we can maintain visual.
This NTSB weather animation overlays the path of the aircraft with ground radar images of the storm. Bushman and Orogel landed in lightning, torrential rain and hail, and 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Based on the information that we had from ground-based weather radar, the flight crew of 1420 should have been seeing majority of that storm. They would have been seeing the leading edge going green, rapidly changing the yellow to bright red.
I can't see anything. Looking for 460.
As they progressed towards Little Rock, they started to paint the bad weather not only on their onboard radar, but they could see out the window lightning. And one of the key statements that this captain made, which basically summarized the entire flight, was the captain saying,
I hate droning around visual at night in weather without having any clue where we are.
I hate droning around at night when I don't know where I am. That was such a key statement. It was at that point, by an experienced 10,000-hour captain, that he should have abandoned the approach going into Little Rock and either gone to his alternate or made his way back to Dallas. But to make a statement like that and then continue an approach to an airport where you have a thunderstorm in progress over the airport is a recipe for disaster.
But the pilots were not the only ones to be heavily criticized. As the investigation continued, American Airlines flight policy would come under fire. An industry-wide scandal was about to be exposed. For months after the crash of Flight 1420, the NTSB dug deeper into the circumstances surrounding the Little Rock accident. The question was, who would take responsibility? American Airlines was reluctant to admit that their pilots had knowingly flown into a severe thunderstorm. Initially, they tried to pin the blame on the controller at Little Rock. Americans started legal action against the authorities responsible for airport controllers. Americans' lawyers claimed that the crew of Flight 1420 had not been given all the current weather information.
American 1420, your equipment's a lot better than what I have. How's that final for 22 left looking?
But after interviewing the controller at Little Rock, investigators were unconvinced.
It's highly unlikely that the flight crew wasn't sufficiently informed about the nature of the weather and the severity of the weather, not only en route, but of course during the course of the landing at Little Rock.
The focus turned back on the pilots. Lawyers representing the passengers were determined to get American to accept liability for the crash.
I mean, it is about money in a way, because you want to make them pay. Because I saw the letters that they would write back to my lawyer, minimizing what we had been through, minimizing my daughter's burns, cuts, the psychological effects it had on my son at age 15, and my daughter and me, and just minimizing everything. So you want to find a way to